All right, thank you. Sorry, hang on, I'm just trying to find the agenda. All right, meeting is called to order at 6:01 p.m. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Goethe School Pledge. Place your right hand over your heart, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Biggie and Casey, if you want to lead us on the Goethe Pledge.
As a citizen of the world, I will follow Goethe's circle of learning. Curiosity opens my mind, ideas lead to knowledge, responsible choices show respect, cooperation strengthens others, learners are courageous, empathy creates community.
Thank you. Let's move. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Biggie.
Als ein Bürger dieser Welt folge ich dem Kreis des Lernens. Neugierig, ideenreich, respektvoll, kooperativ, mutig, empathisch.
All right, moving on to roll call. Frank?
Present.
Sam?
Here.
Pete?
Here.
Katrin?
Here.
All right. Moving on to the affirmation of board findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
I can second. Ah,
So that's Katrin. All in favor? Frank?
Aye.
Sam?
yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
And that is a yes for me as well. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
I do.
Second.
It's Frank. All in favor? Frank?
Aye.
Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to public comment. Casey, if you wouldn't mind reading it and check if we have any public speakers today.
The public may comment on any item that is on the agenda or any other item that is in the board's jurisdiction. Members of the public who wish to comment during the board meeting may use the raise hand tool on the Zoom platform. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and the total time for this purpose shall not exceed 30 minutes per meeting. If an interpreter is needed for comments, they will be translated to English, and the time limit shall be 6 minutes. Individuals may speak 1 time per subject. The Board of Trustees reserves the right to mute or remove a member of the public if comments or actions disrupt the board meeting. Board members are prohibited from responding to or commenting on matters raised by the public that are not on the agenda.
Thank you, Casey. And do we have any speakers?
Nope, no speakers at this time.
All right, then we will move into consent. I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes of November 15th. All in favor? Frank?
I abstain. I wasn't present.
All right, Sam?
Proof.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me as well. And we are off to the ED report, guys. Chris, the floor is yours.
Okay. Let me. Let's start there. Okay, well, good evening, everybody. And a couple items to, actually quite a few to hit today. And as always, we will start off with enrollment. Well, we don't have worse news, or not much worse news. We went from 381 to 380 students. We are still in a conundrum with regard to enrollment. And so that will be a part of the financial statements that we look at today, because now we've got to the point where it's recognized in our year-end assumptions. So that's definitely an ongoing concern. we're heading into to winter break, and we usually have some drops in ads. We do know of unfortunately 2 families that are moving out of state. Same issues we've been describing before. We do know of a couple of students who are coming to us new as well. So we're hoping that that'll balance itself out. And in the next few months, we are really hitting our pre-lottery marketing, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But hitting that very strongly to address if we can possibly get even some more from this year as we're looking for next year. You can see where the enrollment is. It's, as I said, very similar. We gained a few and lost a few in the month, but the overall number is basically the same as we were at in last month. One student short of that. The second thing I wanted to just hit on, we had a discussion or a question about what kind of recognitions has the school been going after, as well as what else is out there for us to kind of get our name out there in terms of recognition at the local level, state level, wherever that might be. So first of all, we were definitely happy this fall to be renamed. So 3 years in a row, we've gotten Best of the West Side with the Argonaut, and that's a nice little piece locally that we have. The other thing that I think is really positive is that we did get an A rating with Niche, and that is the about 70% of web traffic when people are looking for schools does go through Niche. The other major one is Great Schools, and I think we mentioned before that we were not happy with the way Great Schools shifted their rating system, and it did affect us in a negative way. So the way to resolve that for us is really work on what we're working on, which is improving test scores, particularly with regards to all of our student groups, socioeconomic level being an important one. So but at the same time, our rating on the niche side of the world is quite good. Other things that we have been working on, obviously, is IB certifications. We are still a world school with our PYP program, and our MYP program is proceeding towards that certification as well. Our IB coordinator and Mr. Michelson are both working together towards making sure that we're headed in the right direction for us to be able to get a world school recognition under IB. We actually have a training that is coming up in January that relates to this. It's one of the requirements, and so that's an important key piece, and we'll be continuing to move forward on that as well. The other, as you guys are aware, we did last spring receive our WASC accreditation at the maximum level of 6 years, and that was a really great job, particularly to Ms. Jones, who guided us through that process and really did strong work in terms of preparing and getting us ready for the WASC certification, and it was very successful. Another piece that's important to understand in terms of our recognition is that we have been designated out of charter schools in California. We have been designated on the high track for charter renewal. That is going to play a really important piece when we do get to charter renewal time in 2025. The high track, there's a high track, there's a medium track, there's a low track, and the difference between them is the low track, the assumption is they will not be renewed. For the middle track, the assumption is renewal needs to be looked at very closely, and LA Unified is, of course, doing exactly that. With a high track school, the assumption is to be that they are to be approved. We'll see how all of this plays out in reality, but that is the way the state has set it up, and we are on that high track at this time. So we want to stay there as we continue forward. And then finally, there's another piece that I think is really important, which is the California Distinguished Schools program. We had received a distinguished school, I think it was back in 2014. And then we also received some other recognitions from the state, including a green ribbon and also a gold ribbon, which is what they did when they replaced briefly the distinguished school program while things were on hiatus. They have still been on hiatus in terms of statewide accountability. And as soon as that system is back in place, which it looks like it should be and will be comes for this spring, we will be hopefully reaching a point with our test scores where we would be elevated to the point of being able to apply as a California Distinguished School. So we'll be keeping an eye closely on that. I don't know, usually they have 1 year where it's elementary, and another year, the following year, it's secondary. So we'll have to see and whether we apply as a K-8, which I think is likely, or whether we'll apply as our middle school in one and our elementary in another. So we'll check into that, but we're waiting for that accountability system to be renewed. Yasir, would you like me to stop for questions or keep going until the end and then take questions then?
Why don't you keep going if that's all right with every member?
Okay, so remember those questions. Just a quick update on Prop 39 and our facilities when we're looking ahead to next year. As I mentioned at last meeting, we had applied, did our November 1st application. As kind of expected, we received a notice of non-agreement on our assumptions, which means we have to turn around and send a letter back. It's the same thing that occurred last year at this time. And we did do just that, is turn around and send a letter back. So we're working with legal on that right now. But I think the most important piece for us is that final bullet there, continuing to work cooperatively with Marina Del Rey Middle School administration, because we're really at a point where our best choice in the short term right now is to do an alternative agreement similar to what we did this year, because it allows us to keep our program going, and our goal would be to have enough rooms to be able to expand kindergarten and potentially expand 6th grade as well from where we stand right now. So those are our two pieces that we're working on, and the key is cooperation with MDRMS, and we've been working on that internally and even externally with the recent event at the school garden where we coordinated a garden cleanup. We're going to plan to do that again in January, and the idea, not just to get the garden clean, but also to establish a good working relationship with Marina Del Rey Middle School, as well as the community at large, because the idea is with the garden that we are building out a community garden as part of it. So there'd be our space, and there'd be the space for Marina Del Rey Middle School, and then there'd also be plots that would be available for community garden. And we think that that's a bonus because more people watching over that space. So we'll continue to move in that direction. There is not at this time a lead on a partial space, but we will continue to look in the spring. It's hard at this point to be getting lined up for an opening for like 1 or 2 or 3 classrooms space, where we're talking about we want it in August. So it's a little early in that, but we will continue to be looking as a backup option if we're unable to secure a alternate agreement. And again, that was how we planned it last year, but there was nothing that was available to us last year. So it really worked out well that we got the alt agreement. I wanted to give a quick update also on marketing. I had a chance to talk a little bit with Katrin. Thank you for that conversation, and thank you for the connection with Taproot, which is a nonprofit that helps nonprofits, and gives us access to some free consultancy. And so one of the areas that they can consult is in marketing. And so we had a chance, both Nazmia and I sat down with a person through Taproot. He was actually coming to us from Florida, and he gave us. He kind of looked through what we are doing, and he was actually said, you know, from what he can see, we're on the right path in terms of the things we're doing, and that what we really need to do is develop a more specific plan, and that could be the next step. So we've initiated a little bit of a task force to look at this, and we had a chance to meet last week with Nazmia, myself, with Biggie, and we've also brought in it was actually a past parent, Thorsten Rode. Some of you may know him, and he has exactly this expertise. He had helped in the past and had agreed to help us out again. And he's unfortunately part of the problem in that he moved to Germany, and the family moved there, so he's part of the enrollment drop. So we know how that is, but he's still excited to help us. So he's going to be really a great sounding board moving forward, and he's just incredibly knowledgeable. So what his suggestion is we really need to focus on what where we're going with digital marketing, and get more specific about our analysis of our website traffic patterns. And so we're actually meeting to see, today's Monday. We're actually meeting on Wednesday with our niche partners. That's part of the role that they play, and I think he'll have some questions of where things go from there, with a little more expertise than my eye on this kind of thing. So I think that'll be really helpful. One of the other pieces that we're doing is specifically requesting content from teachers with regards to our pre-lottery push, particularly on our through digital marketing. And in particular, we've been pushing out with a number of different ways. We've done it through Google Ads, we've done it through Facebook ads, but we're also, in addition to those Facebook ads, we're going to be reaching out to Facebook groups and kind of inserting our own content and forwarding things that teachers are saying, this might be going on in my classroom, and then getting that out there into Facebook groups. And so I'd like to give a little shout out to Nazmia. She has been fantastic about understanding the ins and outs and getting herself involved in these groups. And so she's joined several of them and is able to pass forward suggestions and information for local West LA Facebook groups. So asking our teachers to really give us that content. I mean, they've been great in the past. I mean, I think if you're not on our Instagram account and you are interested in seeing what's happening, it really is. We're getting a lot of good information, and that account has grown from, I think 50 users at the start. It's over about 500 now. And we're gonna, and that also is the basis of what we push out to Twitter and what we push out to Facebook as well. So that's something we're going to be really pushing in the next 3 months as we are in the heart of pre-lottery season, and pushing hard towards getting people at tours. Okay. Wanted to give a quick staff update. And the staff, we are finally feel like we're at full strength. We have one of our instructional aides who is back from paternity leave, and that's great to have Mr. Alex back. And we also filled the kindergarten aide position. And that will allow us to really have, I think, a better coverage both inside the classroom, but especially outside the classroom. And as we've been mentioning kind of all year, really establishing norms in our kindergarten, our first and our second grades. Those are the ones where we're really, we want to be sure we set the stage correctly so that year after year that will, those behaviors will continue on. We did add 12 additional hours of on-campus intervention that is to support students and who are anyone basically who is listed as an unduplicated count student, which is low socioeconomic, English learner, or foster youth, and making that available. We have digital options, online, and we also have on campus. And so this is with live and on campus, and we made use of 2 of our regular substitute teachers. So these are not unknown faces to our students, and they know our system. And so we've worked it out where they are working two of them are they're each working 2 mornings a week. And so across 4 mornings, we were able to add 12 hours of intervention support that is in person. We do it with small groups just outside the classrooms. We also are currently interviewing and doing demo lessons for the MYP position. And so we had last week, and we had another today. And we are continuing to interview and get that set up. We are still hopeful to have that position in place in January, but that's a very high priority for us. And just to let the board know that all of our current teachers are progressing appropriately and towards their staff development and the evaluation process that we do each year with our teachers. So things are proceeding apace on that front, and we really I can't say enough about our staff. We really have a strong staff that cares about kids and works extremely hard. So that's a real plus, and I want to assure the board of that. Last couple, I have 2 more items. One is with regard to fundraising, and I know this is something that everyone watches closely to make sure that we meet our budget projections and maybe even get a little beyond that. And so Biggie, can you give us a quick update on where things are at as of, well, I was going to say as of today, but as of the 10th, where things stand in terms of fundraising revenue? And this is all money in hand. This is not projection or anything like that. This is actual funding that has occurred. So Biggie, why don't you give us a little update?
Well, what you see here on this in this table, that's just the events that we have done so far in comparison from this year, which is the amount in the second column, to the revenue from last year. Obviously, you can see there are still red numbers, but we're only halfway, not even halfway through the school year. That means that at the annual giving, we're at a good point right now. We have a pretty good number of recurring payments set, which means that there will be still money coming in, and we'll also do another ask this week, actually, to encourage people to make a donation before the year end, which then would be a possibility for tax deduction. The matching donations are still lower, but we know that we have 3-4 matching requests out there, which would bring us right away to the number from last year. and there are more out. For the Jogathon, as you can see, this was a very, very successful event this year with $20,000 more revenue than last year. Shop for Goethe and Eat for Goethe are ongoing things. Eat for Goethe, we're doing a dinner out pretty much every month, sometimes two. So we'll meet the number from last year. And house shirts, that's kind of a up and down. One year, there's a lot of people who need new house shirts, and then the number is higher. One year, you don't need as many house shirts because children haven't outgrown them and students still have them from last year. That's why the number from last year is pretty low. The number from the previous year matches more what we're seeing this year. In addition to what you're seeing there, because obviously the 227,000 plus what we're expecting, let's say 250,000 from these events, is not yet where we're supposed to be from the perspective of what was budgeted, which I think is $320,000. But we're still having the gala, which has begun, which we have begun planning. Then there's still the grant from the German consulate, which we have applied for and submitted the paperwork for. And that's usually just a formality for them to approve the grant. So that will come in. And then there are other little events that we've typically done along with the big ones. So I, at this point, am very confident that we can make the 320,000, if not more, but we'll have to see, unfortunately, how Corona develops, because the gala to some degree is dependent on what we can do as event. We're planning it anyway as an outdoor event. However, how many people actually really come and how let's say, how good the atmosphere will be, and that obviously increases donations. That depends on how the status of Corona is at that time. So I'm positive, but I don't have the crystal ball to say, oh, in 4 months, it's going to be like this. So we're working on it, and we want to be prepared to have a great event with an online auction piece, which shouldn't be too much impacted by how Corona is. But yeah, I'm positive. We'll see how it ends.
Thank you, Biggie. And then the final thing that I have is just to let you know, we have been notified as to when our oversight visit is going to be. Timing was not ideal from our perspective. The date of they're splitting it into 2 phases. They do a virtual visit, so we're going to do some things by Zoom on February 2nd, and then they are going to do an on-campus review on February 3rd. So it'll be across both those days. It means all of the documentation is due basically over our vacation, which is financial documents are due to January 7th. And then the other binders are due January 13th. But we already have, we've got it all mapped out as to how that happens. In fact, there's something on your agenda today that relates to that, that we're keeping track and are ready to go for oversight. And just to give you an idea, last year, oversight visits are looked in 4 different areas, and it's done on a rubric of 1 to 4, 4 being best. And last year we did really well. We had 4s in 3 of the areas and a 3 in the other. And anything that are 3s and 4s puts us in great shape for renewal of our charter. Anything below that is potentially concerning. The areas that we did well last year, we're going to do our best to continue on that. And fiscal operations, we had a different person last year who was, we actually kind of pushed back on this a bit, and we thought we really should have gotten a 4, but they disagreed. It was over some very, very minimal things of some $20 late fee for this because the mail was slow. And anyways, don't need to go into that. But we are going to do our best. We do have a totally different person coming this year. But with all these areas, honestly, they do look for where is it they can write up. And so we're going to do our best to get 4s across the board, but we definitely want to get 3s and 4s moving forward. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Yasir, with questions.
Thank you, Chris. Everyone needs a job, right? All right, I will open it up. Frank?
Yeah, I have, let me go on video here too. So give me a sec. I have 3 comments, questions. So at the ratings, I looked at the ratings for the school. It's around that. So I presume that this is an A rating under niche and not an A+.
It is an A rating under niche.
Yeah, and so is there a chance that we can get to an A+ rating?
It is, but again, I think the key here is our next set of test results, because 2019 is our most recent set of test results. So I hate to put too much on high stakes testing, but this is a very important spring for us.
Yep. Okay. And then on grade school, there is a 6 out of 10 rating. And it's specifically in regards to the test score for the socioeconomic and the subgroups, and the equity piece of it. Is there a comprehensive plan to address the shortcomings? I'm calling them shortcomings, right? And the relative shortcomings in the socioeconomic and the English language learner skills, comprehensive plan to address the matter so that the test scores come up.
Yeah, the place that we're in right now is you look at the even on great schools, it says our overall rating when it comes to test scores is an 8, and that's where we were.
Yeah.
But it's in the how they calculate for student groups and how those groups are growing. And so our plan is exactly what we've been putting together with the funding that has come in with COVID, and that is we've been since the beginning of school working with groups of kids. We are tracking. We use iReady as our guide, but we are tracking all of the kids and their support levels. We're looking at how are our English learners being supported, and what benefits they're getting from their classroom teacher, from the support that we have on campus, and also the support that we have virtually. We're also doing the same thing with intervention, and that's happening, as I said, both on campus in multiple ways with the additional instructional aids that we've added, that are working with individuals and groups of kids. We are doing it with the ones I just mentioned that we added. The 12 hours of morning time on campus. And then we also have our virtual after school intervention program, which is ongoing and happening, and supporting 30 to 40 students in that in that means in small groups at different intervals in the afternoons.
Well, I think, Dr. Jones, I think there's an opportunity also for the authorizer who is going to look at the learning progress in the subgroups and the social economic, just to summarize and give them an excerpt how you address it, because they always hone in. I just compared the ethnic composition of Marina Del Rey against us. Their enrollment is down significantly too. But they are right on our campus, and they are 50% Hispanic and like and more than, you know, socioeconomic. And so if they are progressing against us, you know, I think it's like I'm always afraid of this, you know, of that we're not serving this community right. And so maybe there's an opportunity to write an executive summary for the authorizer to say, and this is how we are addressing. And this was the issue. Just be prepared, you know, as
Sure.
a comment. And I was holding my third comment. Thank you. Yes, yeah.
Sorry about that. Yes, Sam?
Thanks, Chris. Turning to something that you were saying at the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about the high track for charter renewal. So who is it that places us on that high track, and is there a chance that can change before 2025? And is that indeed related to the oversight visit itself?
It's a great question, and the good news is it is at the state level. So it's the California Department of Education who makes those determinations. And but much of it is related again to test scores. So our current test scores, and the most recent one is 2019, did put us in a situation of being at that high level. So you can see these same test scores, depending on what metrics and algorithms are being used at the state level, at a great schools, at a niche, at LAUSD. Everybody has different opinions of what those numbers mean. So our most important thing is doing our best this coming spring to do well compared to what we had done in the past, but also we've got to keep in mind the entire state, the entire country has been in pandemic mode. And so it's all going to be relative. There's no real like rules of thumb at this point. It's just going to be, we've got to do as best as we can possibly do.
Sam, anything else?
No, nothing else. Thanks.
Pete?
Surprisingly, nothing from me.
Katrin?
No further questions. Just wanted to say it was good to meet on marketing, and I'm really excited to see what happened since we spoke.
All right, then we will. Move on
And
to
I would welcome you, because you kind of brought it to us. If you want to participate in any of those meetings, if it's you know, okay with the board, I think it'd be great to have a board member kind of keep an eye on that committee, and you're welcome to do that if that's the board's pleasure.
I think that's great. I think you know, board members need to get more involved. Katrin, if I could just ask you, because I did this like I think like 2 or 3 years ago, just like as a benchmark, like starting off point where we are today, and then the impact. You know what I mean? Like 2 or 3 months from now, that'd be really great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
All right, let's move on to the Finance Committee report. I'd like to make a motion to approve the financials for November 2021. Is there a second?
I second.
That's from Frank. Go ahead, Frank and Chris and Ryan.
Yeah, I think this is a, you know, we reviewed the financials, we reviewed the check register, the credit card statement. Again, thank you for pointing this out last time. I think the finances for the months are in good order. And please, Dr. Jones, your floor.
Okay, well, let me get this a little bigger so we can see it. Okay. All right, make it big enough to be seen. Okay, this is our monthly financials, and we're now in November, so we're getting a little bit more honed in on where we're going to end up on the year, which is the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. So when we look at projections now, we're getting a little more honed in. It doesn't really get, you know, we don't get too close to this till March or April. And really don't find out till May and June where we're hopefully gonna find some savings, but we have some ideas of different pieces. The most concerning piece is the one I brought up earlier, which is enrollment and the loss that we're at. I'm going to ask Ryan, if you are here, if you can kind of walk us through the dashboard this month. And Ryan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great.
Hi, everyone. This is our dashboard as of November 2021. And just real quickly, as far as enrollment goes, we had 383 students through the end of month 4 at an average daily attendance percentage of 95.1. So we're about on track with our budgeted ADA percentage wise. However, because we are under enrolled by over 40 kids, we are seeing a revenue impact to our LCFF and our other funding sources attached to average daily attendance.
Can I interject there, Ryan, for just a sec?
Sure.
In terms of our enrollment, definitely there's an issue, but our ADA, which yes, it's meeting our 95%, but we had been shooting for above that, which is 96%, maybe even going towards 97 if we can get there. I just want to make the board aware that one of the big impacts on this is independent study. And as the board is aware, we did have a quarantine situation that affected the last 2 days of the particularly with it was with second grade. And when students are initially out, they do not get credit until they've completed their independent study contract. So there's no way for them to complete them at the end of the month. So that did have a pretty dramatic effect on and drop down a bit of a percentage point because of that. Those will be made up in terms of ADA because we're keeping track of that now. We have a full system to make sure that we're getting all of the independent study contracts signed and the work completed by students. So just be aware that it'll nudge up a bit from that 95 level that it's at.
Yeah, just as a point of reference, while 95% is less than this organization is used to, I just wanted to point out that across LAUSD and across the schools that XED works with, you guys are among the higher of the ADA percentages during this time. I have lots of schools that used to get close to 98%, and some of those are dropping below 90%. So while we are under our targets, I did want to give you guys some credit because whatever you are doing is working. So good there.
Just to give you an idea of I think where the system we've put into place with regard to independent study involved getting some additional support with our independent study technician, but that really I think is paying off manyfold in terms of making sure that we don't leave any money on the table.
Okay. Chris, I'll touch on the income statement now, if you can move just a little bit downward. So on the revenue side, we are experiencing a revenue loss of $388,000 compared to budget. The big variances are from ADA and our LCFF funding. You'll see we're under budget by about $348,000. Federal revenue, we've seen this already, and it has to do with timing of our stimulus funding. So that's not really a new variance. And the other two that I'll point out, other local, the 30,000 lower there, that has to do with us removing the food service sales from the budget model. And on the grants and fundraising piece, I know Biggie just went through our fundraising as of now. But one thing that was new is a grant. that the organization received for technology, and that was new money, and that was about $36,000 higher than what we budgeted for.
Just to clarify, that was one of the ones I talked about last month. This was the connectivity technology grant, and that's how we are purchasing Chromebooks that we were planning to purchase with other funding, and now we have extra funding to do that. So it actually was very much to the good.
Thanks, Chris. Then on the expense side, we are still experiencing savings in our certificated salaries. As of now, we're forecasting to have a collective savings of about 59K, and that's due to open positions and timing of hiring under the certificated section, specifically under teacher salaries. Our benefits are also trending lower than budget. We're about 75K under, and that's based on the trend of the first 11 months worth of, I'm sorry, 11 months, the first 5 months worth of invoices. So I believe that's attributed to lower rates as well as a lower participation than we originally budgeted for to start the school year. Student supplies are about $80,000 almost under budget as well. The big mover there is the nutrition cost for the year due to limitations surrounding this pandemic and administering our food program. On the operating expense side, we're looking at savings of 109K. The big savings there has to do with our rent assumption that we originally budgeted for. We came in about 96K under what we originally budgeted for rent for this fiscal year. Net,
If you recall, that's because we were planning for we're trying for 2 more classrooms, as well as a contingency in case we're able to go someplace off campus.
correct. So our net loss, we're projecting a net loss at this point in time of 25,000 compared to an $8,000 net income in our October presentation. And the big shift there has to do with enrollment in ADA coming in lower and us lowering down our funding associated with ADA for the remainder of this fiscal year. So as Dr. Jones mentioned, we're trending 95%. We're shooting for higher than that. And the hope is that this is the most conservative worst case estimate from now until year end.
Unless enrollment continues to drop.
Unless enrollment continues to drop. Cash at the end of the month for November was 1.5 million. We're forecasting $1,042K at year end with an $800,000 receivable. That's everything related to the dashboard. The last page is the check register for the month. But in this packet is also the details of the variances in our financial analysis notes, as well as the income statement and balance sheet.
I'll give everyone to take a moment to review the check register, and then we'll go for the ratification. All right. So all in favor to approve the Finance Committee report for November 2021? Frank?
Aye.
Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
We will now move on to the ratification of the first interim report. I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
That's from Pete. Go ahead, Chris.
All right. Just to give you an idea, this is one of the 3 important financial pieces that we documents that we provide every year, and this was based on a month ago's where we stood a month ago. So it is the first interim report. There's also a second interim report that happens in the spring. And then at the end of the year, when we do the close, there is the annual report. So those are the three, and this is the first of those. It's the least accurate, obviously, because it's this time in the year, and we're saying where we stand right now and projecting out. But this is all done not in the methodology that we give you each month, which is through XED's dashboard, but instead it is in the format that is required by the state of California, LA County, and Los Angeles Unified. So specifically, Ryan, if you want to just kind of walk us through, this is a ratification because it's already been approved by last month's financials, and it's also it's already been submitted to LA Unified and the county. Ryan, anything to add on that?
Very simply stated, this is our financials that were approved as of October, transferred into LAUSD's template that they require for us at first interim. The finance committee went through and actually tied this out to the prior month's dashboard, and went and compared the year-to-date actuals, the forecasted, and the board approved revenue, expenditures, and net income. And finance committee tied it out and confirmed that everything transferred over correctly. And now we are looking for an approval from the full board. Lots of pages of numbers.
All right. If everyone is ready to vote, or are there any questions, Frank?
I have no questions, no comments, except for we reviewed it and it's accurate.
Sam?
No questions, thanks.
Pete?
No questions.
Katrin?
No questions. Thank you.
All right, then on to the vote. Frank?
Aye.
Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me as well. We are now going to vote on the approval of the Educator Effectiveness Fund. I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
That's from Frank. Go ahead, Chris. Oh, thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
can
Have a good night,
Drop
everyone.
off.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Good job.
Okay, so last month, we put out here the Educator Effectiveness Fund. This is a $75,000 that we have not received in the past, but it is through an application process to the state. This isn't a competitive kind of grant, so we just need to be sure we do all the things that are required. And part of that included doing the public hearing that was last November, and the other is to get this approved this month so that we can receive this funding. We determined in talking with our staff, we shared this at the finance committee, and discussed it as well at the parent advisory committee. These three different areas that we're looking at, which are the bulk of which is IB. We can spend this, by the way, not just in this year, so it won't be 75 to the good this year. It'll be some of that because we'll be spending some of that. But this would be basically things we would have been spending anyways, and we're happy to be able to do that. So IB is one of the major pieces. For instance, I mentioned the MYP training that we're doing in January, and that is fairly costly because of the number of people we're doing it for, and we'll be able to use this funding for that. In the same way, we have other teachers who need to do IB training. We have new teachers as well as some of our teachers who have been with us for a while who need to do and want to do refreshers in IB. So that's where we put the bulk of the money. We also put some money aside in our teacher certification program, as well. That's so that we can, we basically do that through LA County. And we have some Title II money that we already have set for that. But this gives us the ability to, if we have multiple teachers in a given year in the next few years, we'll be able to cover that through this fund. And then the other was the Fountas and Pinnell level literacy. That was really a big push from Casey, particularly for the primary level, that we do training across the board on that. So those are the three major areas, and I'm put it there for the board's approval.
All right, thank you. Frank, any questions, comments?
No questions, no comments.
Sam,
No questions from me either.
Pete,
Nothing from me.
Katrin?
None from me either.
All right, then we will move on to the vote. All in favor to approve the Educator Effectiveness Fund Plan? Frank,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
Motion's moved and ratified. And that was a yes for me. Sorry, Biggie. We will move on to the approval of the Finance Committee parent member nomination and appointment. I'd like to make a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
That is from the committee chair. Go ahead, Frank and Chris.
Yeah, we Anna Vogtländer has joined the meeting. We reviewed her resume. She spoke to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee is happy and very happy with the candidate, and highly endorses the candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Any questions from the other members? Sam?
Thanks. Were there any other applicants for the position? I agree Anna's resume looks wonderful, and I accept the Finance Committee's recommendation. I was just wondering about other levels of interest.
No, we did not have any other applicants. And I was getting a little nervous, and then this one came through, and I was like, oh my goodness, when I saw her resume, it was like, wow, talk about somebody who's got experience, obviously not in educational finance, but overall finance picture. Really has a good working knowledge. And I also did have a chance to talk with her about what would be the requirements, and so I also give a very strong endorsement for this as well.
Thanks. Nothing else for me.
Pete?
Nothing from me.
Katrin?
Very strong background. No further questions.
I agree. Let us move on to the vote. So all in favor, Frank?
Aye.
Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
That is a yes for me as well. Moving on to the approval of certification of board compliance review. I'd like to make a motion, and I signed as well. So is there a second? Whoa, no second?
Oh, second.
Oh, thanks. Pete. I was like, I know this is controversial. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, this one's not controversial. This is something we do every year in preparation for our oversight visit. I actually signed this earlier in the year when we're kind of setting everything up. We have different deadlines that are given to us by LA Unified that happen at various times in the year. It's not just all coming due at one time, and so we have to meet all that calendar of information as it comes in. For instance, making sure that everybody is credentialed, and making sure that everybody has had the proper trainings, and making sure all the different pieces are in place. And so I review this with our board president, and I can vouch that we are going to be fully ready for our oversight visit when it comes in February. We have a full, actually it's the same type of Google document that we use as an administrative team to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. So we divide up all the work and then get down to the pieces that have already been done, and then there's pieces that need to be prepared that the due dates are still coming. But we're definitely on track for everything, and we don't anticipate any problems.
Thank you, Chris. If that's, let's move on to questions and comments, Frank.
I have no questions nor comments.
All right, Sam.
Thanks. I wanted to understand the process that you go through, Yasir, to confirm the compliance. Do you have an opportunity to review the forms, or are you walk through it? You know, how do you make sure on behalf of the board that these items have been completed?
So ultimately, this is my third year of going through this motion. And so when we go through it, like there are outstanding items that Chris and I review as far as items that need to be done, items that are still pending, and items that are in process. And it is through it's through that exercise where Chris, you know, he's ultimately responsible, and I sign off that he's going to be responsible for completing it, or the fact that those items have been completed. If those items are not to the satisfaction of the oversight visit, then they're identified by the oversight visit. So it's kind of like a check and balance where ultimately, as board chair, I can't go in to make sure all of these items are done. Chris is saying that they are, and if they're not, it'll come back in the oversight visit, and then, you know, then I'll come back and say, well, Chris, we signed this together. Why did it go south? In the 3 years that I have done it, as Chris identified, the things or the items that were noted that we were dinged for, yeah, I think most of them were based on conformity that either the school did not expect to be scrutinized to that extent, and it was brought back to the board, and it was an understanding that, hey, this is, you know, either this person was being extra scrupulous, or there was no way we could predict that. And then there were times where we had incidents where teachers, you know, Chris had vouched that teachers would complete their compliance or their accreditation requirements. Between the oversight visit and the board meeting, they did not meet. It did not happen, and we found that out after the fact. So to the extent that I can say that I will vouch for it, yes, I do feel confident that, you know, based on my experience on the board for the last 3 years, that Chris has the most recent information to vouch for it. I have the most recent information and trust in Chris to vouch for it. And if it does not pan out, and if there are items that are triggered by it, we will come across it in the compliance, or I'm sorry, the oversight visit. Does that answer your question, Sam?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Pete,
No questions for me.
Katrin,
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
all right, thank you guys. Moving on to the vote, all in favor to submit or to approve the compliance review document, Frank,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Katrin.
Yes.
Okay, that is a yes for me as well. Moving on to the next item on our agenda. Sorry, hang on a second. Just lost my screen. The approval of contract with Pepperdine University for directed teaching. All in favor? I'm sorry, I'd like to make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
That's Katrin.
I'll second.
Got two. I'll let Katrin have it if that's all right, Sam. Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. Bringing yet another non-controversial item. It is it was great news that we were contacted by Pepperdine. They were looking to place a German-speaking teacher into a bilingual program. And apparently in years past, Pepperdine had agreements with Goethe, and we want to rekindle those because not only for our immersion program, but our non-immersion program, the English side as well. Pepperdine's a great school. That's where I did my doctorate, and it's one of the pipelines where we can get really good high quality staff is through this process, and so it's also beneficial for the teacher who is doing the directed teaching, or what we think of as student teaching. It's benefit for the master teacher. They gain a lot out of it in terms of analyzing their own teaching, and then imparting that and mentoring someone else who's just entering the profession. So it's a real positive. We put it on quickly because we want to get this started come January. So I wanted to get it onto this meeting so that it could get approved.
All right, thank you, Chris.
So
Frank?
Dr. Jones, who's paying whom?
There is a whole whopping $150 involved, in which the school, Pepperdine, pays the master teacher. And it's just sort of a thank you, and it makes it all above board. That's common practice at really all universities. They provide and it's almost always $150. They provide to the master teacher, so it's not something that costs us any money as an entity, and we get a real positive benefit out of it.
So then my follow-up question is, why is the board seeing such a contract?
Because it's a requirement in order to for the school to be able to do it. They need to have approval from
not
at the
38
board
out of 38?
level. So
Oh.
I'll sign the contract, but
Oh.
it does need to be brought to
That
the
works
board
for
for
you.
approval.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Sam?
No questions. Thank you.
Pete?
I think it's a great idea. I do question a little bit the greatness of Pepperdine. No, just
Oh my gosh. Sorry. Who pays who, Pete? Who pays who? That's what I want to know.
exactly.
Katrin?
Just one question. How does the sort of the reporting work? Say there are issues with the performance of the student teacher. Do we have a staff member from Goethe supervising this person?
Yeah. So the way it works is they're assigned to a particular staff member, and it starts with they do observations in the classroom. They see how that class functions, how the teacher functions. They start with doing a lesson and get feedback from the master teacher about how they did on that lesson, and then they'll do other lessons, and it'll grow it a little bit, and then it's an 8-week residency basically, and for the last parts of it, it's either a week or two that the student teacher or they call it directed teaching, but the student teacher takes over usually for the last week or two, and runs the classroom and gets a real feel for what it's like to start the day, the pace of the day, and run through it. But it's always with the observation of the master teacher.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions, let's move to the vote. Frank?
Aye.
Sam?
Yes.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes, for me.
All right, moving on to calendar and topics for upcoming board meetings. Frank?
I have no topics or for upcoming board meetings.
Sam?
A question, had we identified a date for that January meeting?
Sam, I'm glad you mentioned it because I was going to wait for everyone. Is it all right if we continue and then we can reserve that for the last thing when I come up?
Yes, of course, thanks.
All right, Pete,
Nothing from me.
Katrin.
No, nothing.
All right, thank you guys. So Frank, the last board meeting, Chris had presented us with a draft strategic plan overview, and the board felt compelled to spend more time on it, and we felt that it was necessary to drill down farther into some key areas that were identified by the task force. And the board wanted to devote a specific meeting to that purpose. And I think Chris reached out to you, and unfortunately, my email for Goethe wasn't working, and I didn't get it for I think a week and a half, right, Chris? Like when you and I talked last week. So I was never part of it, and then Chris and I were talking about this meeting last week, and he was like, you never got back to me about this date. So if it's harder for me to get out. I feel like we should all definitely meet in person. It's harder for me to come out on a Thursday afternoon, because then I'll just have to, I'll be in LA for the whole weekend and just, putzing around. Is it possible for us to meet as we did last time on a Saturday morning? And if not, I can still, try to make that Thursday evening work. I'll just throw that out there.
So
I would prefer a weekend if that's at all possible.
Frank, Sam, and Pete.
yes, I could go either way. Dr. Jones, we spoke about it, and he filled me in, and I read the minutes, and so I was aware of that meeting. I'm okay. Whatever works best for you.
Oh, thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. But if it's not okay for you and Sam or Pete, it's also okay. I can make it work.
This is Sam. Weekends are generally fine for me. I just have a couple conflicts in January.
Okay, Pete.
So if we could start later on Saturday or do a Sunday, then the weekend is fine for me as well.
Later, what do you mean by later? Like 10-ish
Sunday.
or?
Sunday, it's the day after Saturday.
I love Frank's response. It's a Sunday.
Sunday is a problem because that's when I play soccer. It's just priorities. I'm just joking. No, of course I'm good on Sunday too.
Pete, if we did a later Saturday, what would that look like?
Anytime after, say, 11. I'm open Saturday or Sunday. Sunday, I'd prefer to get a flight out by 2 or 3, but other than that.
So isn't that just not a flight? I mean, just from it's at the end of the day, it's your decision. Can you not fly in the morning? We do 11 o'clock meeting, and you take a 10 o'clock out of LA to go into Phoenix.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah,
You
that's
have
fine.
to you don't have to pay for the accommodation or anything of that.
Well, I was at this time I wanted to actually no, I don't mind.
Yeah.
But I do want to spend if I could get my ideal would be if I could get there on a Friday afternoon. Chris and I usually meet. I'd like to meet with you, Frank. I'd like to meet with me. You know what I mean? Do this proper this time and have a little bit more time to spend with a few other board members too. So I'm for me, if I can get there on a Friday afternoon and then leave on a Sunday afternoon, and get stuff in. So if we can do that instead of a Thursday night, I feel like that might be, yeah.
That'll work for me.
Okay. So let's go in order. Sam, you okay with that kind of block?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Pete, you okay with that?
Saturday, like 11-ish between Saturday and then Sunday, earlier, a little bit. All right, and then
Okay.
Katrin?
Which Saturday are you talking about? You see, or is
Well,
it
well, I'm
the
not-
Saturday
I'm-
before our Monday board meeting? So
No,
I
no,
mean,
I'm not. I'm just like trying to pick out like a date range, and then Chris,
Got
I
it.
was gonna hand it off to you to like run with it. And Katrin, you good with that?
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay. So that being said, Chris, if you wouldn't mind engaging everyone, like I'm pretty good, like January, February, March, but I'd like to hope if we can get it in January, February at the latest, that would be ideal. So.
The only way is like what is it, the MLK weekend, right? Because I have to be in Las
Yeah,
Vegas.
not a 3 day.
look-
Yeah, not a 3 day
yeah.
week. I would.
Yeah. This is
right.
this is like when I have to drive my son to a soccer tournament.
Hey, are you still coming to Arizona?
I was there. I'm just already.
Damn it, Frank. What did you
I
do?
was 2 days and I had to get out of it. Like the non-masking thing was scaring me.
can I can I ask Sam? You said you had some conflicts in January.
I'm clear every weekend, I believe, after MLK weekend. It's just the weekends prior to that I have problems.
Okay. MLK weekend is the 17th. So the 22nd would be a possibility in January, which does, we do have a regular board meeting, but that if we put that aside as that's a let's get stuff done weekend. That would work from my perspective of on the Saturday, the 22nd to do an 11 o'clock.
I'm fine with that, Frank.
Yes.
Sam, you're good because it's after.
Good.
Okay. All right. Pete.
I believe so. Let me just double check here. The phone's never quick when you need it to be.
It's so much easier to calendar when we're all on the same Zoom.
For sure. For sure. What we say, the 22nd of January?
Knowing we do have a board meeting on the 24th.
That will work.
All right, Katrin.
Yes, that works for me as well.
All right, 11 a.m. January 22nd. I'm not going to say tentative. We'll say firm.
And we could potentially do it in the same spot we did it before if that worked for everybody.
Yeah, that one's pretty good.
Might be cold and rainy.
Not in California.
Well,
Never.
I know, but it's
Just tomorrow.
January. Yeah, no, just listen. It could be. And there we are, then with parkas and jackets.
And we'd look for about a 3-hour meeting.
All right, sounds good. And we'll do luncheon.
Okay.
All right, guys, thank you. I do appreciate it. And Chris, I still don't think my email's fixed, but
I'll send everything to both your Goethe email and also your what is an Outlook account.
Personal. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, then at this point, we will convene to closed session.
Yoke.